Tomorrow morning, you might casually open your fridge, grab some milk, and pour it over your cereal or into your coffee. It's a quick routine, probably not giving it a second thought. But here's a fascinating twist. The real surprise isn't that you drink milk. It's that your adult body can actually digest it. For most of human history, producing lactase, the enzyme needed to break down milk, wasn't something adults could do. In fact, for most mammals, lactase production drops off after infancy. It's not a flaw, it's just how nature works. Once babies are weaned, they typically stop needing to process milk, so the enzyme fades away. However, humans veered off this path. At some point, people began consuming milk from animals they didn't nurse from: cows, goats, sheep. Their bodies weren't naturally equipped to handle this, but they drank it anyway. For thousands of years, our biology lagged behind our habits. So, the burning question is, when did humans start drinking milk that wasn't meant for them? And how did this choice change their way of life? To unravel this, we need to look at the animals first. In the sprawling lands of the Fertile Crescent, an area covering parts of modern Turkey, Levant, Iraq, Syria, and Iran, people began domesticating goats and sheep around 10,000 to 11,000 years ago. Cattle followed soon after. This wasn't a single event, but a gradual shift across communities. People went from chasing wild herds to managing their own. Initially, they used animals mainly for meat and other resources, but dairying introduced a game-changing advantage. A living, lactating animal could provide ongoing food supplies without being killed. Slaughtering an animal gives you a one-time meal. A milking animal, on the other hand, offers a renewable food source as long as it's alive, cared for, and bred again. This isn't just a minor difference. It completely transformed what a herd meant to the people maintaining it. But here's where it gets really interesting. A slaughtered animal is a one-time transaction. A milking one creates a continuous relationship that must be managed over time. This new dynamic meant herders had to juggle a different set of daily challenges than just raising animals for meat. Female animals only produce milk after birth, so herders had to plan breeding carefully. They needed to decide which females to keep, when to breed them, and how to ensure a steady milk supply throughout the year. Newborns still needed milk, so humans had to figure out how to share the milk without depriving the young of what they needed. This required no formal education or record keeping, but it did demand careful attention and years of experience. Herders had to live closely with their animals, watching the same mothers give birth time and again, learning which ones produced more milk and for longer periods. And here's the kicker. Over time, herds stopped being just a single resource and became more like infrastructure, something to be developed and maintained, not just harvested. If you're enjoying this dive into history so far, smash that like button. Ready to uncover more about how this ancient practice reshaped human life? Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Looking after animals involved more than just keeping them safe from predators or moving them to better grazing spots. It was also about keeping them healthy through tough times, all for more than just meat. The herd became a valuable asset, providing milk as a continuous return. But who first thought of drinking milk from another animal? There's no record of a specific person, no dramatic tale to tell. Imagine it began slowly, without any grand event. People lived closely with their animals, watched how the young ones fed, and noted how much milk a female could produce. Maybe someone decided to collect a bit here and there. This could have happened independently in many places, before anyone thought to dedicate containers just for milk. This makes it seem like using milk was almost a natural part of caring for animals, rather than a separate invention. Archaeology doesn't pinpoint the exact moment dairying began, and it's wrong to create a specific story. What we do know is that by 6600 to 6400 BCE, communities in Anatolia, Upper Mesopotamia, and the Iranian Zagros were already using milk from cattle, sheep, and goats. These early traces don't point to a single origin. No one place or group can claim to be the first. Researchers suggest that Anatolia and the Zagros developed dairying independently, but around the same time, each using their local animals. In Anatolia, cattle were central, while in the Zagros, sheep and goats were more important. This distinction indicates that dairying wasn't a single invention that spread outwards. Instead, it was a shared solution to similar challenges across different regions. The gap between the first domestication of these animals and the earliest evidence of dairying is roughly 2,000 years. But that doesn't mean people waited that long to start. Early dairying might not have left many traces, especially before pottery was widespread enough to preserve milk fats. Communities without pottery could still have milked animals, but they left little evidence that modern scientists could detect. Once dairying began, it changed daily life around the herd in ways meat production never did. But here's where it gets interesting. Keeping animals alive involved protecting them from threats and managing their breeding. Timing was crucial for milk collection, aligning with lactation periods. Someone had to gather and store the milk, figuring out how to use it before it spoiled, because fresh milk doesn't last like grain. We aren't sure about the exact routines each community followed, and it's misleading to suggest every household did the same thing. Yet, the overall change is evident. If you're finding these insights intriguing, consider hitting subscribe and pressing the notification bell. You won't want to miss more fascinating revelations in our next segment. A herd could now provide a steady supply of food, not just future meat. But fresh milk had a big downside. It spoiled quickly without cooling, and many adults couldn't easily digest it after childhood. This created a challenge. If dairying were to become a long-term practice, people needed solutions. One answer was simple tolerance. While reduced lactase production made milk hard to digest for some, others could handle small amounts without getting sick. But here's where it gets interesting. Processing was likely a key solution. Turning milk into cheese separates out most of the whey, where the lactose dissolves, leaving the cheese with much less sugar than the original milk. Fermenting milk has a similar effect, as the microorganisms consume lactose during fermentation. Whether or not early communities knew the science, they figured out that processing milk into cheese and fermented products made it easier to digest and last longer. This was crucial for those long trips or during lean times when fresh food wasn't available. There's evidence suggesting that by the 6th millennium BCE, people in parts of Europe were already making cheese. Now, this doesn't mean every community did the same or that they intentionally used fermentation to solve digestion issues. Some might have just stumbled upon it while trying to preserve food. Fresh milk might still have been consumed, but it's hard to tell fresh from processed dairy based on the remains we find. This whole process turned dairying into its own little ecosystem with tasks and planning. Months in advance, people made breeding decisions. Every day, they paid attention to which animals produced milk. They had to have the right containers ready for a liquid that wouldn't last long. Some of each day's milk had to be turned into something that could be stored. These weren't dramatic inventions, but a pattern woven over time, as people quietly built a practice around animals once valued mostly for meat. We can trace some of this back to real people, not just their pots. Scientists identified dairy fats in ancient pottery by comparing carbon isotope signatures in the fats to known ranges. This helps tell milk fat from meat fat, but pinpointing whether the milk came from cows, sheep, or goats requires more evidence. Here's something even more fascinating. Milk proteins can be found preserved in the hardened plaque on ancient teeth. In Britain, researchers studied dental calculus from Neolithic people dating back to roughly 3800 to 3090 BCE. At Banbury Lane, one person's dental plaque contained milk protein, proving they consumed dairy. If you're interested in more discoveries like this, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the past. Separately, none of the 3 individuals from the same site showed the genetic trait that allows them to digest the milk easily. But here's the catch. They still consumed dairy. This paints a fascinating picture of a group enjoying milk despite lacking the genetic ability to digest it. Though these genetic and protein findings can't be pinned to one person, and 3 people is too small a sample to make broad claims, it's still an intriguing glimpse into their world. Imagine that. People consuming dairy without the genetic trait that would make it easy. That's the twist at the heart of this tale. Ancient communities were managing dairy herds and consuming milk long before the genetic ability to digest it became common. Culture led the way, and biology followed much later. Now this is where it gets interesting. At Tollensee, a battlefield site in Germany dating back about 3,200 years, researchers looked at 14 people. Only one had the main European trait for digesting milk as an adult, suggesting it was rare, around 7.1% in that group. But don't take this as a blanket statement for all of Tollensee or Bronze Age Europe. By this time, dairying had been part of European life for over 4,000 years. If we trace back to the earliest evidence in Southwest Asia, the gap is even wider, over 5,000 years. Whatever edge this genetic trait eventually gave, it hadn't yet transformed the populations carrying it. Here's the crazy part. Over the next 3,000 years, the ability to digest milk as adults became more common in parts of Central and Northern Europe, although it never spread to everyone in Europe, let alone worldwide. And this wasn't a one-time thing. This genetic trait evolved independently multiple times. Scientists have found several different versions in Africa that are not only different from the European one, but also unique from each other, popping up in various African and Middle Eastern populations. Different groups, with different animals in different environments, arrived at a similar trait through different genetic paths. Why did it spread at all? That's still up for debate. Some think it's because milk is rich in calories, but a big study on dairying, disease, and the milk digesting trait across Europe showed that milk consumption alone didn't explain why the genetic trait became common. Instead, it pointed to times of famine and disease. In hard times, people without the trait who drank milk might have gotten sicker and died more often than those who could digest it easily. So maybe the trait spread not because milk made healthy people healthier, but because it helped some survive tough times. It's just one idea among many, and it's wrong to simplify the story to people drank milk so the trait spread. Evolution caught up with some, but not everyone. Even today, many adults stop producing lactase after childhood, sticking with the older human pattern. If you're finding this journey into history fascinating, smash that like button. And don't forget, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss more intriguing stories like this one. Tomorrow morning, as you grab the milk from the fridge and pour it over your cereal, think about this. It's not so odd that some adults can't handle it. What's truly surprising is that any adult can easily digest lactose at all.